4 years on this project and other things. And I always have one of my partners who does our funding and also runs our operations group is with me. So I have a very brief handout of talking points that I thought would be easier to go through than all the lengthy reports we've been doing for the last 4 years. I see there's been a handout up here of a presentation we did back in December with DEP and rural development, all the funding agencies. You have that, but I'm going to try to go through this in a more concise manner than that. And I'll answer any questions. So just to do a background of why we're here and what's been going on, the background issue on page 1. So the town of Wiscasset has had historically some wastewater compliance issues going back quite a few years, where the treatment plant wasn't being licensed and there was some operational concerns down there. So as a result, you had some enforcement action with DEP and had a consent agreement, actually a couple of them, that said you have to do certain things, and there was 4 things that came out of that. So one of them was to study your sewer system and determine places in the system that were leaking excessive water when it rained, that were overloading the plant and overloading some of the pump stations and causing overflows. Number 2 was to evaluate the town's 18 pump stations. For a small community like this, you've got about 15 miles of sewer, but 18 different pump stations to get over all these different hills around town. That's a lot of pump stations for a community this size. And some of them are quite old, they're between 20 and 50 years old. Their useful life is generally about 20 years before you have to start doing some work on them. So DEP had concerns on that, so we had to evaluate those. Number 3 was to evaluate the wastewater plant. Even though the plant, as I'm going to talk about, is in pretty good condition for its age. It's some of the plant was built in 1964, so it's 60 years old, and some of the plant was upgraded 30 years ago. But some of the equipment is original, so these had a concern that maybe some of the operational problems we had in the past were because of the plant's position. So we did an evaluation of that. And then finally, and this is kind of a big reason we're here tonight, is the regulatory push lately has been on climate change and rising sea levels and resiliency of infrastructure. Like, what are towns going to do, especially coastal towns, if storm surges and rising sea levels impact infrastructure? And Wiscasset is a postage child for that, because your treatment plant is sitting out in the middle of the river. So they wanted a study on that. So we did those 4 studies, and the response to DEP was the 4 studies listed up. We did a sewer system plan in March 2022, a wastewater pumping station evaluation in April 2022, a wastewater plant evaluation in 2022 May, and then the climate adaptation plan was done in 2022 July. That was funded by DEP with a grant. On page 2, so the handout that's here on the table and those 4 very lengthy reports go through all these issues in great detail, but just in a nutshell, the certain points here. Number 1, I think the most important to say is that the town has addressed the operational issues of the wastewater plant, so that the plant staff knows very professional. The plant is being run within compliance with all its parameters. And so you may occasionally have a violation, but not the kind of things that got you into trouble before. And these are, right now, they're usually due to some kind of limitation of the equipment or process. So the plant is being run the way it should be. I want to say that. As far as the sewer system goes, we did nighttime flow gauging throughout the community. We found several areas where there is high flow when it rains. It's mostly through leaking manhole covers, brick risers on top of the manholes and bring them up to grade, and some leaking pipes. So what we recommended was some TV work, and had budgeted some surgical repairs around the community, but that really wasn't as big an issue as the other ones. As far as the pump stations go, we looked at all 18 of them, and some of them are just old and need to be upgraded or replaced. And that's just common. There's a 20-year useful life for this kind of equipment. It's running 24 hours a day, every day of the year. It's got, water and sewage and gases going through it. It tends to corrode it. So there's just, and a lot of the equipment is obsolete, or the controls are obsolete. So we looked at that. It's in the report in detail. The wastewater plant of all your infrastructure components is in really good condition for its age. There's specific processes in the plant so the wastewater plant works by taking dirty water at the beginning and making clean water at the end. And it's done largely by growing bacteria that biodegrade the organic matter. You take out the bacteria and leave clean water behind. The plant actually is in very good shape for its age, but there's some equipment that's obsolete, doesn't work, and so this plant would be primed for an upgrade, but wasn't located down in the river. We would just be saying do the upgrade. And then finally, the sea level rise and the climate change issue is really the big thing that's causing concern with DEP right now. The plant is located right now in a 100-year floodplain. So there's parts of the plant right now, forget sea level rise, forget climate change. Right today, a 100-year flood, if it ever came, would inundate parts of the plant. And I'll go through some of those in detail. So that's a concern. But so when we looked at that, we said, well, we've done this in many towns around the state. And the first thing we look at is, well, can we make the plant resilient? Can we raise some of the tanks? Can we raise some of the critical buildings up above the sea level? And we're always looking at on a 50-year model, 2070 right now. So we have different models from NOAA of where sea level might be. So can we raise the plant above that? And then the other concern is if you had a hurricane, and Maine's only had a few hurricanes in decades, but a storm surge coming up the river could cause wave action to come in and wash out and damage some equipment. So we looked at floodplain and storm surge issues. And you could raise some of the tanks above the floodplain, which we thought you could do. And you can put in a wall around the plant, which I think Boothby High was talking about doing to take care of the storm surge. So we looked at that as an option, a viable option, and also looked at, well, you could relocate the plant, which DEP has been pushing really from the beginning of this. So in looking at the cost of relocating the plant or fixing the plant, our recommendation in the climate adaptation study was, we think this plant could be made resilient and protected for the foreseeable 50-year future of flooding. DEP issued a letter in October 17th of 2022 and accepted that plan. And that's how we were proceeding. So the next thing would be, okay, I'll look at the funding in a bit here. But no matter what you do, it's going to cost a lot of money because these kind of projects are expensive. So when we looked at the table on page 3, to say, well, how bad is the floodplain issue? If you look on this table up top, it shows elevations of water levels compared to plant levels. So the white column that says elevation feet next to each, on the left, each different critical component of the plant shows how high it is right now compared to sea level. Then off to the right, there's a table for the year 2022, 2045, and 2070, which is looking at, we did this in 2022, so current, 25 years out, 50 years out. Anything in blue says, well, the model data suggests you're going to be inundated with flood levels. And then over to the right is the storm surge table. If waves come in over the plant, there's a lot of blue there, so most everything would be covered. And if you look down at the bottom of the page there, it shows actual elevations, but on the right-hand side, it says how far would be submerged. So things are going to be covered by a few feet of water potentially. So on the next page, so the easy answer is, well, let's move the plant. But on these kind of studies, you always look at costs. We're always trying to find the least cost. So this table at the top of page 4 shows the sewer system costs are about $3.6 million estimated in 2022 dollars to fix all the leaks that we found. And that's true all the way across. There's a column for upgrade the existing plant on the left, then relocate the plant to Federal Street, which DEP had suggested up on the school property. And we also looked at the Mason station location because the town owns that. So we looked at those 3 things. There may be other sites in town, but this is where we started. And the pump station remediation is the same for all 3 cases because the pumps are needed for no matter what you do for treatment. The plant upgrade, though, to make the plant resilient and to upgrade old equipment was about $21 million, which is typical for this kind of work all around the state. The relocation would require abandoning the plant, building a pump station, pumping it under the water, and getting it up to some land in the Federal Street area, either near the school we looked at or even the old public works, the current public works, which is fairly old building, which might need replacement. We looked at that site as well. That would be about $35 million for the plant work. And then over the Mason Station, because you're pumping a long ways and you need extra pump stations, would be $45 million. So when you add all these together, and this work would be phased, the town wouldn't do this all at once, but we looked at $32 million to upgrade the existing plant, $46 million on the Federal Street area option, and then Mason Station, $55 million. So just on cost alone, generally when you do these kind of government-funded projects, you look for the lowest cost option. So to us, it was a no-brainer to upgrade the existing plant. Plus, we had DEP's approval of the climate plan. when you look at these costs, it's important to note these are in 2022 dollars. We're now in 2023. This discussion's gone on for quite a while now. And construction costs, as you know, are escalating every year, probably 5 to 10%. Whenever a final option is pursued for funding, we'll have to be looking at some of these numbers. The important thing is you only have 810 users on your source system. So it's pretty clear that a project of this magnitude is going to require a lot of outside funding, a lot of grant funding. And time is of the essence. Right now, everybody's telling us there's all kinds of money available. Well, we haven't quite seen it yet, but it's supposedly out there. So time is of the essence to get into the current infrastructure funding group, especially with regard to climate change. There's a lot of funding being proposed for that. So with that as the backdrop, we met with funding people about a year ago on December 5th, which is what that presentation there is. That's what we went through with them in detail. And our thought was we're going to go into this meeting and come out with a path to go forward to start applying for funding. That was the obvious conclusion at the time. We're a little bit surprised when we got to the meeting and DEP advised us, announced that they really didn't concur with their prior recommendation to upgrade the plant and to, on the approved capital climate study. They didn't agree anymore. They felt there was some changes coming in federal regulations, which would make more sense to relocate the plant. So I'll talk about it in a second. And they said it would be in the town's best interest to work with DEP to relocate the plant and get out of the water area. So this raises some concerns. Okay, so the biggest thing is that DEP has not yet given us an official written position to that effect, and they might not. But you have to have DEP support really to get funding, because most funding agencies are going to ask DEP to support the project, and they're saying we don't. So they gave us a memorandum from EPA, which basically said that President Biden signed an executive order saying that federal funding was not to be used in any floodplains anymore. And they're using that as a basis for their decision. I'm not an attorney, your attorney is sitting right here, but we can talk about that in a minute here. But we responded back to DEP on January 10th of this past year and said, okay, well, let's look at that. So we'd like to have a written response that revokes the climate plan that you've already approved, that just as a matter of good practice to see it in writing. We also wanted clarification on the memorandum, because as I read, and I'm not an attorney, but as I read the memorandum, what it really says is you cannot build in a floodplain if there's any alternative available, and it says practical alternative. And I've been doing this now for over 40 years, and generally when you look at options, practical, alternative, or non-practical is often tied to cost. Because you could argue that no treatment plant should ever be built in a floodplain. You can always put in a pump station to pump it away, but it may not be practical. So we just wanted clarification on that, and we haven't gotten it to date. We also asked, the most important question is, well, if the town agrees to relocate the plant to work with DEP, can we have some written assurance that DEP will stand with us to get this huge amount of funding we'll need? Because 810 users cannot afford this on their own. We'll need a lot of grant funding. I keep hearing there's all this money out there, and there probably is now compared to how it's been in past years. However, the kind of money we're talking here is huge. So it's going to need to be some kind of a special climate change package that is geared towards a project like this. And we also wanted DEP to take a position, a written position, that if the town decides to seek the funding and apply for all this funding, and we don't get what we need to keep this reasonable to the sewer users and taxpayers here, would they support relocating the plant and going back to the October 17 study, which we felt could be implemented and make the plant instead of looking ahead 50 more years. Another thing I just want to mention, treatment plants with a 20 years useful life. I've generally looked at it every 20 years. You've done it here every 20 years since 1964. So that gives the town a chance in 20 years to look at the plant again and decide if the data, this modeling data, is as good as it looks like it is right now, and make decisions then. So that's kind of how we got to where we are tonight. And so the current considerations is really what we're meeting tonight is, I think, there's a lot of risk right now for not applying for funding because it's not going to be here forever. So the town really needs to to pursue funding opportunities and pick an option that you want to try to get funded. Because we need a sizable funding package to make this thing work. There were some discussions with FEMA, where FEMA said, well, we're not necessarily concerned about that floodplain issue because all their projects are in floodplains. And they might fund the project. We had a Zoom meeting with them. The concern though is even FEMA has to have a 25% match. And so if you talk at 25% of say $40 million, it's still $10 million. So that's the kind of match you're gonna need to work with other people like DEP, rural development. And so this issue's gonna come back again. And I guess the other thing, just to be, our firm, we've done probably 50 treatment plants over the years. And our reputation, we've done brand new plants, if they're necessary, but we kind of have a reputation of trying to make old plants work. And your plant is a very sound infrastructure, other than the floodplain issue. But I would have to admit on this bottom point here, you could argue, I couldn't argue against the fact that when I look at your plant, it's in a lousy location. You would never put a plant there nowadays, even without floodplain concerns. So, the town could decide to work with DEP on page 6. And maybe your long-term best interests are to not fight the issue this time and say, okay, we'll apply for funding. You say you can get us a package. If you can get a decent package that is within your financial capacity with 800 users, you could relocate the plant. But we need to have some direction because in order to get funding, you have to have a site pick. You have to have an environmental review done on the site, which is something we do on every project. So we have to have a site. Now, we've looked at sites on Federal Street. We've looked at the current Public Works garage. We've looked at Mason Station. Probably something over on the Federal Street Public Works site would be the most reasonable option. Public Works seems to be a good site because it's kind of sort of remote. And the town already owns it. And the Public Works garage is really in kind of dilapidated that needs to be replaced anyway. So I guess, that's kind of where we are tonight. And I think the best thing for the town to do is to make a decision. Are you going to try to pursue with DEP whether or not the plan can be made to move? Or are you going to work with DEP to say, okay, help us get the funding and we'll move the plant? It may be in your long-term best interest to do that. But we need to have a tentative site decision and a direction decision. So.
So, Bill, when we talked about the Public Works garage site, building a new Public Works garage is not figured into this,
It
correct?
is not.
So first, for everybody listening and when this meeting gets written up, I just wanna clarify for folks that when we say Federal Street, it means Sherman Park or Sherman Field, doesn't mean like on Federal Street, cause I think people hear Federal Street and they're like, oh, that'd be terrible, so I just wanna clarify that.
That's my radio going on, the world's coming to an end apparently.
Well, if that's the case, there's no sense even worrying.
We're done.
Motion to adjourn. Yeah, so, I mean, that's why I've asked for this meeting, we need to get going on this. And Bill and I and Rob, we need some direction, we need some instructions as to, what we need to be doing. Especially in terms of some of the FEMA funding, because the FEMA money is available now, the NOFO has come out, and it's due in January. So we don't have a whole lot of time, to get this in if we're gonna take advantage of that, and that's $701 million, I think, nationally, I think was the number. So, that's not chump change.
So I guess I'll start off with what I'm thinking based on all this is that it doesn't seem like it makes sense to take any of these options off the table and to work with DEP and see if they're willing to help us move it. I mean, I guess I would just as soon take the cheapest option particularly given that our plant is in good shape, and build the wall. But if that means we're gonna have a higher cost overall, then obviously that's not a great thing. I don't think Mason Station makes a lot of sense in terms of it is much more expensive and it's further away. And I'm not sure it makes sense in an economic development sense that we want to put it out there. But I guess where I'm at, I feel like we should pursue the conversations and find out how much money is out there, and not take things off the table yet. I don't know how other people.
I had a conversation with Rob before the meeting, and I think I'll have him tell you what he was thinking about if we upgraded stayed where we are. There's discuss some problems that might arise if we do things and then have to add more costs.
Yes, well, what I wanted to say was, the plant itself, when Bill says it has very good, bones, it's not decayed the way a lot of sewer plants are, and that is true. But many mechanical things, piping, pumps, blowers, things like that, they're all aging out. Many of the control systems also, there's not very many digital things over there. Everything is analog. It's an on-off switch. It's, we just recently had a controller go bad that was about 30 years old. And we were gonna have our electrical engineer, check it out and replace all the things that were wrong. And he said, it's easier for me just to bypass it and put in a new digital, readout that's about this big. And, that was still several $1,000s, but it was a lot cheaper than hunting down all this old stuff and replacing it or finding 30-year-old parts or that are, not even made anymore. But with the plant staying, if we were to choose the option to stay, there's an awful lot of things that do need to be upgraded, and some of that is included in Bill's assessment for the $25 million.
So it's all included.
It is.
Yeah.
So that's a big plus, because everything would be getting upgraded, and you wouldn't be moving it to another location, things would still be getting upgraded then. So, also, and thinking if you were talking about economic development, the plant currently runs around half to slightly less than half capacity. So if there was to be expansion on Gardner Road or further out Birch Point Road, or you get a new housing development or something like that, we'd still be able to handle it at that location. The only things that I had questions about regarding the future of the plant is that at some point there may be additional restrictions put on our permit, which tells you have limits on things like ammonia and things, BOD, TSS, that are allowed to be put into the Sheepscot River. You have to remove a lot of that stuff. And there will be coming things, particularly nitrogen removal and possibly phosphorus removal, that we're not set up to treat for right now. Now, Bill may know there may be techniques and ways that we could utilize existing tanks to do that removal.
It's a tight site, there's no question about it, however, there is room that you could add future processes
Okay.
within that site.
Okay, well, that was a concern, because every time you get your permit renewed, which is every 5 years, they tighten the restrictions a little bit. And now there are certain things, and you may have heard, they did a bunch of testing for PFAS, our community was included. But the DEP's action on that, they're taking action on certain plants that really had egregious numbers, and we were not included in that. So for right now, they're not doing anything with PFAS at every sewer plant, but eventually, that may happen. But as far as the system goes, that's being addressed with those numbers as well. And there's an awful lot that does need to be upgraded. An example is, that there's the new assisted living facility that's going in on Gardner Road, and we do have to upgrade that pumping station to handle that flow. So anyway, that's in the works right now. Over's been doing some surveying, and they're gonna help us with that. But as far as whether we stay or move, I didn't know if we need to hold the DEP's feet to the fire and say, make us move, or we wanna stay. Will you back us if that's what we decide? And I don't know if the DEP would move quickly to respond to that. especially since our back is up against the wall with maybe January deadlines on some of the funding.
So I know you mentioned that we haven't gotten any of the clarification that we'd asked for. Do you think that's something we can push for to actually get?
My impression, the attorney speak, but I don't think they're gonna do that. I think that they've kind of taken the position that, well, they can't really make the town do it, you're not in non-compliance right now. So they probably aren't gonna say you have to move the plant. However, if they don't support your funding applications, then you're not gonna be able to get funding from most different agencies without DEP support, so. It's kind of like a pocket veto in my opinion.
It'd just be good to know, you know?
Something I haven't heard anyone mention at all is if we move the plant to another location, what happens to all that infrastructure that's down on our waterfront?
What happened?
You would abandon it and tear it down, probably. Or, you know,
At further cost.
And further cost, yeah, that's not included in the.
It is.
next cost.
there's an allowance, if you look at the table in the presentation, there's a demolition allowance.
Okay,
Oh, there.
Oh, so it is
So that's part of it.
I mean, again, 2022 numbers and everything.
Right, and the pump station it would take, because there needs to be a pump station there.
Sure,
which
no,
could be-
understood,
Yeah,
understood, but it wouldn't be another Mason station.
No.
Yeah, okay, because I don't want that.
no,
All right, good to know.
Can I speak again?
Yeah.
What I wanted to say was, if nothing else comes out of this meeting, it would be great if we got at least a decision, hey, we're gonna try to stay. Hey, DEP, we want to stay. Are you gonna help us out, or are you gonna let us flounder and not give us any funding? So I feel like that's like the salient point.
They've already
Because-
made, I don't wanna debate you, but they've already said we're not gonna fund anything on that site.
Okay.
Again, not in writing, but just,
It feels like blackmail.
it almost
It
feels
is.
like we're being forced to trade the car because it needs new tires. Which doesn't really make sense to me.
I'll just, I don't know how helpful this is, but I can maybe speak to the relationship with DEP and that issue. The DEP doesn't have any real leverage over the town, except for, as you pointed out, they can just say, look, we're not gonna support future projects, funding for improve the infrastructure for location. But the town also doesn't have any leverage over DEP. There is no legal lever that you can pull to force DEP to change its mind. There might be, is there the opportunity for a conversation, further conversation with them? Sure, I would defer to you all about whether that's actually likely to result in any substantive change in their position. I suspect not. They probably just staked out their position and this is it. And again, I don't see any kind of legal tool that you could use to force DEP to essentially change the decision.
I guess where I'm at is whether or not we think DEP will change their position on doing something with the current plant, doesn't it make sense to find out what funding is available for all options before we make a decision?
I agree, I think that's your best chance right now.
look, yeah, and part of the problem is when you do funding, it's hard to move ahead in the funding and understand what it is unless you know what it is you're doing. That's the crux of the matter.
So
The funding agencies require you to have, we already know the different types of funding that's out there, to help. But what we don't know is how that's all going to, what that's gonna mean for a package. We have to almost know what it is we're doing
To a location.
to a location, right? It's very specific. You know what I mean? They won't approve anything until we make
Right.
a decision, or you make a decision as to what you're going to do.
Yeah,
That's part of the problem.
I totally get that. I guess what I'm asking is there a way to have theoretical numbers for each of the options? Because
We do, we have
Okay.
theoretical numbers for each of the options.
They're on
of the fund, and sorry, I should,
The funding.
funding, yeah, I should clarify that. Cause I guess that to me is the important thing. I'm not comfortable saying we should do this option or this option without seeing that. Yeah, and then,
Out of the, if we tell them we wanna stay where we are, out of the 32,000 million, $32 million, how much aren't they gonna give us?
They're saying none.
Well,
We get
DEP.
nothing.
DEP.
Okay, well, how much would we, if they were gonna give it to us, how much would they give us? What are we losing on the deal?
That's what we have to find out. So if you look at the three options, DEP is saying we do not support upgrading your plant and building a wall and raising the tanks. Okay, so they're gonna give you zero. On the right-hand side of that table, Mason Station doesn't appear to be a good option for a lot, so you're really kind of in the middle, something on the Federal Street side of the town. Pick a tenant site there, it could be the public works site, it could be the old school site, and go after, tell DEP if you choose to do this.
I know that part, okay, let me put it a different way. If we went with the unknown street, the Federal Street, how much can we get for funding, possibly,
In order
out of
to,
the 46 million?
in order to do a project of this size, you're gonna need funding from multiple agencies, so, you need to apply to everybody.
I know,
And generally, the way they do this is they will figure out what you're gonna incur debt service for part of this, a loan for part of this. And they generally don't want to see your user fees exceed 2% of mean household income. And above that, you really need grant to make the project viable. So no matter what option you pick, your user fees probably be the same, they're gonna bring it to 2% MHI, and I forget where we are right now. So you only have a limited ability to borrow more money within your current user fees.
The original MHI that we were looking at was
So-
around $40,000 a year. I think that may have changed, as we've not moved on it, but it's fairly low. It was fairly low in this area. So they do, so no matter what option you get, the problem is the first option, if you stay there, the only funding that looked like would be acceptable if you stay was the FEMA funding. And they would need a 25% match.
Okay, so I think that's what Bill and I think are looking for the same thing, is that, okay, if we go with Sherman Park, there's an opportunity for federal funding, which gives out $1 million to 10 million, and our chances, and typically people get an average of blank. And then we could apply for DEP funding, which is 5 million to 10 million, like, that's, I'm not necessarily saying that's what you do, but I'm saying that in my head is, and I think maybe that's what Bill's going at too, is what, I know we
What are we
can't-
gonna be on the hook for?
yeah, and what could we possibly get, both low and high end?
Right, and I understand what you're asking. I think, part of the problem is typically, we don't know that until we go into the funding process. And there's no obligation to take the money when you start in the process, but it's very hard for us to tell you exactly what you're gonna get. I mean, we could give you some roundabout estimates, which I think is what you're looking for.
Yeah, like literally within, like, would be 10 million here and 1 million here, or 20 here.
It's really hard to it's very difficult to do that until we start the process.
Mm-hmm.
We've done this everywhere. But they're not gonna put the town under, and it could take many years to come up with the money to do it, is the issue.
You know, the worst thing, it's our own money we're trying to get back.
I understand a lot of that.
Sorry, Pam,
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
So if the, mean household income is about 40,000 a year, 2% of that would be about $800 per household user fee. So if you look at 810 users times $800, that's the revenue you have right now. Generally, after a plant upgrade, it isn't uncommon in Maine for user fees to get up to maybe $1,200 per average household. So you'd be looking at about, say, a $400 increase times 800 users. That's your debt service fund, and I need a calculator to do it, but let's say that would amortize $4 million, $5 million. That means the rest of it has to be grant, or you can't do it. And that was the whole point with DEP, to say, well, you're telling us there's a viable option that costs $14 million less than the next option to fix the plant where it stands. You're telling us you prefer us to move it to a different location. It's $14 million more. Are you gonna be able to get us $14 million more in addition to the money we're gonna need just to stay on the same site and fix the plant? Some of the issues Rob's talked about are in that on that, handout, I had a $21 million line item in 2022 to fix the plant and make a decision, but also to fix all the equipment. So you need to do that anyway, plus 14 more to move off the site. And normally, if we didn't have this floodplain climate change issue, I've been doing this a lot of the decades, you would never say, okay, I'm picking the more expensive option, unless there's a really good reason for it. And in this case, this climate change issue, which is what the government's all about right now, is pushing you to take the more expensive option. And the only thing the town could say is, okay, you tell us there's funding out there, help us get it, then we'll consider it. Otherwise, we want to revert back to the original plan.
Pam?
So can we at least, are we fairly much in agreement that the Mason Station is not an option for?
I agree.
Yeah, I don't consider Mason Station an option, really. I'd rather not, if you're gonna move the plant, I'd rather not just put it right back in the middle of downtown again. You know what I mean?
Mason Station isn't.
And,
Yeah,
What?
were you saying?
it's here, relocate plant to Mason Station.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really don't think we wanna put another, I don't think you wanna
put another facility.
down on the Mason Station
Okay,
property.
yeah,
Because as you stated at the beginning of the meeting, for economic development reasons, you really don't wanna put more things that are that industrial downtown.
for me, the only argument for Mason Station would be if we knew for some reason that that's the absolute priority for anybody who wanted to give us funding, and therefore it would be the cheapest option.
Right.
But I don't,
So I mean, for
I don't think
purposes,
we have a reason to say that,
I
right?
know it's the most expensive option.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
we need to get more money to do that, and
Right.
there's no really.
Right.
so.
It was just used as a site because it was a town owned.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, if the options are only to go with the existing upgrade, and we pretty much know what funding would be available for that at this point, then why not start looking into the relocating
Yeah.
to the field? And I'll call it the field, because it is not on Federal Street, so I don't wanna keep, people to keep saying it. But, down in that lower field and see what we could get for doing it there.
But what interests me is that it doesn't look to me like, just looking out, doesn't look like the field is that much higher than where we are now.
Quite a bit higher.
Yeah,
How much higher is it?
Well, if you got a Google map on your computer, you can find out easily.
Okay,
I can do it.
right.
I assume that was considered when
It
we,
was.
yeah, so I'm gonna trust that it is.
Somebody looked at it and said it was.
Yeah.
We weren't down on that lower part of it, it was up, like you said, that
So it sounds like we are in agreement to take Mason Station off, yes?
I think so.
Yeah, but we at least have to acknowledge that
Keeping for discussion tonight.
we have to at least acknowledge that the people who are currently negotiating for Mason Station have said that they are interested if the wastewater station could be transferred over there close to Mason Station. They were interested in pursuing biomass fuel as an energy producer. And, you know, I'm just saying what the folks out there who are in the clean energy business, what they're pulling for. I think, you know, if the majority of us want to take Mason Station off of this chart, okay. But there was, from our community, they did speak up and say, this is a possibility.
Ryan is online
Oh, good.
tonight,
I don't have to tell him anything. He can speak for himself.
so, you know, that's up to the chair if she wants to entertain a comment from him, but he is, online tonight.
Well, I was trying to keep this
Yeah, I know.
for discussion tonight, which was. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Bottom line is can you hear me okay?
Yep,
Thanks. The fundamental point is that if the Birch Point was a decision that the town wanted to make, that we as the potential abutters are willing to have that conversation with you. And we would be open to it. We wouldn't be immediately scared or turned away from the possible acquisition of Mason Station. We are available for open dialogue and consideration.
thank you.
That's all. I don't need to take any more time than that.
I don't think I can make a $10 million argument for that.
The field is 44 feet above sea level.
The field is 60,
40, I lost it. 40-something feet above sea level. My house is 46 feet above sea level on Federal Street.
okay.
And the plant right now is 10 feet above sea level, and that's the 100-year flood elevation is 10. So that you'd be gaining 35 feet.
If, on the upgrading of the existing plant, if we got 25% from FEMA, is that on the total 32 million rather?
We were talking, that you would not get 25%, you'd have to go get 25% from other entities,
But we could get 75%?
in theory.
Always in there.
In theory, that's the theoretical funding that you were looking for.
Yes.
That leaves a big gap.
So you
There's
get
no guarantee you would get this money either.
the maximum you could get, keeping it where it is 75%?
Approximately.
Oh, I heard you say 25% from FEMA.
No matter what you get.
No, you wouldn't get.
25%
Match.
match from somebody else.
Okay, 75%.
And the amount of money you're talking that somebody else would probably DEP and rural development generally don't award money unless DEP is supporting the project historically.
I think earlier you said, I can't remember the exact words, but that we're not tied into anything immediately if we pursue looking at the funding from DEP, is that correct? Or something to that effect?
You're not tied into anything until you sign on the bottom line, you're
Okay.
tied in.
Well, so in other words, could we move forward with one of the middle options in terms of either the Public Works Garage or Sherman Field? And then if that's not looking good, we then look at the FEMA money, or is the timing just not gonna work on that?
I think you should apply for all possible sources, including FEMA, including DEP, including RD. The biggest thing would be to decide that you're going to tell DEP that, okay, we'll work with you if you feel that you can help us get a funding package to move the plan, because that's what you're pushing us to do. Then we'll start applying for the money, you'll support that, and we'll start and see where the chips fall. If you don't get a funding package we can afford, then we're not gonna sign on to it. I mean, they cannot make you sign into something they can't.
But then, so if we went that route and that happened where we got a funding package we couldn't afford, would we then have lost out on chances for the potential 75% of the existing one?
You would just apply for a different project.
Because we're gonna still
Okay.
try to get some FEMA money, I believe, because this number is
Yeah.
so big, no matter what option, so I believe that the goal would be to try to get money from FEMA anyways. For relocation.
So wouldn't it make sense for us, since we know DEP is not thrilled about the existing, wouldn't it make sense for us to move forward and see what happens in the scenario you just said for Sherman Park?
Mm-hmm.
And then the worst,
I'm sorry, I gotta do it. I think he's talking about the playground above the bluff, and you're talking about Sherman Park. That's way low, right? You said playground. You mean up at the school level.
You're doing
Yeah,
Wait,
you're-
is that
He's talking
true?
about at the school level. You're talking about Sherman Park, which is at sea level.
That's why I kept asking.
thought,
I had it on the hill.
Yeah, I only said Bill, we keep saying Sherman Park.
wait, okay,
Sherman
so
Park
you
is
say
down.
not Sherman Park?
a location in that general area. There's been no survey site picked. We're just looking for land that the town might have access to on that side of the waterway.
I was halfway from the water up to the school.
In the lower.
Okay. No,
Not the outfield. You're not talking about the playground, the outfield, the
No.
tree line there.
No.
That might be 30 feet above the water, but I don't see how. And I don't know, I'm not gonna argue with Google, but just, I think there's a disconnect in this conversation.
no, thank you.
I
Yeah,
also-
there definitely is, because that to me is, I don't think it changes my opinion, but it's definitely slightly different.
Right, there's no site been picked in any of this. In order to do an evaluation and come up with costs, we had to come up with some potential sites. There's certainly, we looked at the Public Works garage site because that was a little bit out of the
Yep.
way and that was town-owned and it looked like it was a pretty good idea. So deciding to move the plant tonight or go down that route as a tentative option doesn't mean we pick the site.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanna make sure.
I took, if we get 75%, which is way out, on the current plan, we'd be on the hook for $8 million. If we get 75% on the, call it Federal Street, we'd be on the hook for $12 million.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but there's more
but there-
opportunities for federal
there's
street.
more opportunities to get that $12 million than there are if we
In
stay where
different
we're at.
places.
So I guess, Bill, what I think we're looking for tonight is, we're gonna take the existing plant off the table, we're going to take Mason Station off the table, now go find us a site to work on.
And funding.
Yes,
Yeah,
and I think that's what we're basically asking, what we're trying to get to tonight is, this is the path we wanna take so that we can get working on it.
and that's what I believe I'm suggesting in terms of, it sounds like if we strike out there and can't afford it, we still have the option of trying for a FEMA grant for the existing. We don't lose out on that opportunity.
Do you want a motion on this? Do you need a motion on this, or
No,
are we
I-
just giving direction?
I don't feel like we do it, we just need direction, because you're
Just
gonna
a
have a lot of other
consensus.
decisions that you're going to have to.
Yeah.
to vote on.
Cause this is really the beginning of the process.
I think that makes sense. Gonna start chasing the money at some point.
So if I may, the other elephant in the room, and I put it on the agenda just to at least have a discussion on it, is, does the town wanna just get out of the wastewater business altogether and turn this over to a utility district? I think we just need to put it out there. If there's no interest, that's fine. But the water company is in the process of changing their charter, which would allow them to take on something like this. And Zach and I kind of talked about some of the complications and downfalls of that just prior to this meeting, but I think, the options on the table, we either need to look at it or take it off, one or the other.
What's the advantage and disadvantage?
Well, the advantage is, the advantage would be, we don't have to have any more of these conversations about what we're gonna do with it, because now Chris or whoever the utility district is gonna be the ones responsible for it. How that would look, I don't know. The town has invested millions into this plant over the years. If the utility district would just say, give us your plant, see you later, thank you very much, and we've spent all that money, got nothing out of it. Not that there's anything to get out of it anyways. There's a lot of hurdles that have to be done with this, and Chris can probably speak a whole lot better to this than I can. I know you didn't want public participation in this, but, or do you just not even wanna have the conversation at all? And Zach can speak to some of the pitfalls that we talked about earlier.
We would have no control over rates then, correct?
That is correct.
That's the downside.
I guess unless we feel like there's some overwhelming public desire to do that.
To see our rates trickle?
Yeah,
I
really.
don't think so.
Mhm.
I vote no.
I don't think it's,
I'm sorry,
it's an
that is
option.
not a true statement.
I'm being facetious.
On having control of the rates, that is absolutely not an accurate, correct statement.
But we wouldn't
The
be,
ratepayers would have say through a public hearing process, much the same as the water side does.
but like the board wouldn't be voting on them. That's when I say that, that's what I mean.
Please.
the board wouldn't be voting on the ratepayers would, it's subject to a lot of regulatory oversight, but you were correct, the town would not be in the business of managing that.
But the ratepayers would have a vote?
A change in,
With the water bills.
water district rates has to be approved by the main PUC, so it's subject to a lot of regulatory oversight. Ratepayers have an opportunity to comment on that process, that's.
Do they comment on it or can they vote on it?
Yeah, that's a big difference.
I can speak to that.
Yeah,
My name is Kirsten Hebert, I'm the director at Maine Rural Water Association. So with respect to the rates, there is in fact a public hearing, and it differs for water versus sewer, but there is very much public participation involved with that. Not to mention, you've got trustees that are elected, and my presumption is that those ratepayers will not continue to put those trustees back in if they disagree with the process and the policy.
I saw that in Illinois. I thought it was a good deal in the beginning, but they keep getting reelected and the prices keep going up.
But the water district could take over and we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore.
So you can't flush your toilet.
I just,
I just look at all the different ways Wiscasset has historically kept giving up control of something, and it comes back and bites us in the backside. And we regret it there. I hate to see us do it again.
my gut reaction is absolutely not, no offense, Chris, but I also don't feel like we've had no conversation about it, there's no.
Yeah.
That's why it's on the
I just-
agenda.
Well,
That
I
would
know, but
be-
I don't feel like,
It has to start somewhere, and
This is not a bad place to start that conversation. I'm interested in it. But, I'm still wondering about the way it looks for us. I hear you, Pam. I hear you, that it looks like we're just, turning it over so that we don't have to make that decision, because that's what it sounded like when the words came out of my mouth. I hate making this decision, deciding whether we're going to be on the hook for 8 million or 12 million, depending on which way we go. If there is another entity, the water district, that can handle it and they're in the business of handling it, why are we in the business of handling it?
so
It's
I
just
guess.
a question.
Well, I do wanna clarify that, just for the public, the reason why I'm not having public comment tonight is because this is the very beginning of the discussion, we're gonna have there will be other public hearings and other opportunities for the public to comment, it's not like we're making the decision and signing papers tonight, so I just wanna be clear about that. I feel like, I'm not sure what the answer is to your question, but I feel like I have at least 12 more questions for this one, so, I mean,
Yeah.
is this something is this one we have to decide tonight?
No.
Yeah.
Currently, the taxpayers paying part of the sewerage fees.
the taxpayers have picked up the deficit from the wastewater treatment plant for many years.
So if we go to the second plan, only the ratepayers will be paying for it, is that correct?
If you go to the utility district, it will be ratepayers.
I think the taxpayers would be real interested in that, don't you?
I'm not so sure the ratepayers.
The ratepayers won't be.
No, that's true, and they are taxpayers also.
But has,
And I'm gonna say again, that when, I hooked up my house to the town sewer station, I was told I would never get a bill because Wiscasset was covered. And I'm now paying a bill, and bill goes up, and, I'm sorry, but the town built this, the town made promises, the town needs to stand by its citizens.
just for clarification, with the help of Maine Rural Water, and some work that Rob has done, we've adjusted our rates so that we're not there, but we're at least close to, at least breaking even every year. But that's not generating enough revenue to put aside capital funds for a lot of the things that we're talking about right now, which now is still gonna be taxpayer dollars, likely, or some perhaps. to help offset some of what we don't get in funding elsewhere, should that gap fall apart. Yeah, I didn't mean to throw a monkey wrench into the works here, but, it is an option, and I think it's just one that you need to have a conversation about. That's my opinion. If you don't want to, you
I
don't
think
have
we
to.
need to leave it on the table. I think we need to leave it as an option. I'm going with you on, cutting off the ends of the, options to consider.
Sewer plant. The other options are sewer.
Okay,
Oh,
so
were you
Just
listening to his
clarifying, would it
radio?
be a change after you upgraded the plant to be created utility district?
no, you're talking about before.
Okay, so you might not, it might not be eligible for the FEMA grants if the utility district.
Chris, what's the number, the households in town, what percentage are on the water district?
Just in Wisconsin, or remember, we served 3 communities.
In Wisconsin,
We're at about 600, 700.
homes, how many homes are there? You know, the percentage it is of the total homes,
I guess I'm still not following.
about 70 or 80%,
They're on water and sewer,
are on water anyway.
but we have a total of almost 800 water customers across 3 communities, just Wisconsin, probably in the 700 range. 700 homes.
Yeah, so we don't know how many homes there are. We're trying to figure out
How
how
many homes in Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Yeah, percentage, like, so I'm not on water because I have a well, so.
And how many homes?
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to think what we did have, because I just.
I had the number on
Population.
27, I thought, no.
1,900 residents, residential parcels, maybe something along that lines of it.
Carla, how many for broadband? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I know you had the numbers at one point.
Like 1,800.
Yeah, so I wasn't far off, 1,900.
So I guess I would like personally to have another conversation about utility district before we take it off the table.
Thank
Like I
you.
said, I don't feel good about it, but I also don't feel like I know enough yet.
Yeah, maybe another separate meeting on just that topic, not at a regular select board meeting. And with more information on
Pros and cons.
pros and cons. Maybe other towns who have done it, and we reach out.
Was that,
That's a good point.
Oh, yeah, ask the questions. Okay,
can we do that?
You can do anything you want, you just need to tell me what you want.
Yes, we would like to have a further conversation
Okay.
about the utility district.
So we're heading for not keep it where it is and not go to Mason Station.
right.
Correct,
Correct.
which doesn't mean we could eventually keep it where it is, but for the moment, we're gonna go with the middle.
Okay.
Does that give you enough direction?
Yeah, I would suggest when we met on December 5th with DEP and rural development, to say, let's get the funding started. We expected we're gonna be getting funding started, looking to upgrade the plant, because again, we had proof from DEP. I think perhaps now, if the town feels, okay, let's bring DEP back and say, okay, you're telling us to move the plant, let's meet again. Tell us where all this funding is that you're telling us is out there, and we'll start the process to find it. In the meantime, nail down a site. You know, I think we should look hard at the public works site. I just think it'll be less controversial than anything. But I think a meeting with DEP with a direction would be the way to go.
That makes sense to me.
I mean, it's sense to me, it at least gives us some idea of something to work on.
It's a December 5th meeting.
We had one
No,
last
it
December.
was.
That was
Yes,
last
December. That was last
A
year.
year ago.
You're gonna get pictures of one this weekend, the new plant?
I might try to ride up there, but I didn't get a hold of them. So, you know, in the next couple of weeks, I'll try to get up there.
I think getting pictures of these new plants, it doesn't look like the old one, when you talk to people, you got a little better selling point.
One time,
But if we're gonna consider the public works anyways, you know, that's pretty hidden in there. Wouldn't be my preferred site, because now I gotta come up with money for a new public works garage, but,
We have all,
There are grants for those too. I mean, there are those, if they keep up the CDF grants, that we did.
yes, I certainly, I think, but if I know now that the end tables are off, this is the place we go, then we can start working on what we need to work on, and I think that's where we're at as of this moment, so. This gives us something to do.
You didn't have anything to do? Sorry, I had to.
Well, it gives me something more to do.
All right. Is there anything else we need tonight?
I think we're in good shape. I think we can get moving, which is kind of important.
Kind of.
So,
We're not in good shape, but we know we're there.
well, no, but I mean, we've been here with other communities. The number just seems to get bigger as time goes on. And the bigger the plant is and that type of thing, with inflation the way it is, it's hard, but the money is there. It's just gonna take time. I think that's the thing to take back from the meeting, is it gonna happen overnight? But if we do nothing, it's never gonna happen, so.
Thank you for this. I appreciate concise versions of
I
things.
think
Motion to adjourn.
this was nice. Much better than the,
What was that?
I might have made a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Adjourned at 7:05. Thank you.
we're not gonna come up with a date, another meeting date.